Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, and welcome to Pangolin, the Conservation Podcast, the show dedicated to exploring and amplifying the world's underappreciated conservation stories. The stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. I'm your host, Jack Baker, and today I am joined by Felix Rowan-Young, a forest school leader and member of the Chester Zoo Youth Board. He is here to chat about what forest schools are, how they work, and how beneficial they can be for young people. We also discuss his degree in zoo management, how he made the jump from primary school teaching to outdoor education, and how you train a lionfish. It is also worth noting that this is the first part of a two-part special, and next week Felix will be back to discuss his work with the Chester Zoo Youth Board. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Now, as you can tell, we have a lot to get through, so without further ado, let's get started. And welcome back to the show. I am now joined by Felix Rowan-Young, the chair of the Chester Zoo Youth Board, an environmental educator, and yes, the person who invited me to speak at the Chester Zoo Youth Board. So I had to return the favour eventually and let him come on the show and talk all about his amazing work. First of all, thank you so much for joining me today, Felix.
Thank you for having me.
You are very, very welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. And yes, we've had one of the youth board representatives already in the form of Connor. So it's big shoes to fill. So no pressure at all to get started.
No, I'm only joking. No, Connor's brilliant. But yeah, I was a bit jealous when I heard him. I was like, oh, maybe I can do that.
I'm sure you can. Again, we'll try and talk about slightly different topics from what we talked about with Connor. We will circle back, of course, to the youth board and all that sort of stuff, but we'll try and talk a bit more about some of your other work as well, so we're not just covering all the same sort of stuff again. But yes, to get us started, I've kind of briefly introduced you there. Do you want to give a bit more of an introduction to yourself? I always think it's much easier for you to introduce yourself than it is for me to introduce you, because you know all of the stuff about yourself. So tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
You make it sound like it's really easy, Jack, but at the moment, when you sent me that question, I was like, what do I actually do? Because everything's up in the air a bit at the moment. I kind of would say I'm a bit of a jack of all trades when it comes to what I'm doing at the moment. I would say primarily I'm interested in conservation education. So I'm just training as a forest school leader now. I was previously a primary school teacher, came to my senses, you could say, and quit that. And then now I've just got a casual role with the Wildlife Trust as an education session leader. So I've sort of gone more towards environmental education. As you mentioned, I'm also on the Chester Zoo Youth Board, first as a vice chair, then as chair, and recently have stepped down, taken a step back to just be a board member. So I'm seeing all aspects of that. I've also just joined the FSC Youth Council, the Field Studies Council. And in my spare time, I'm actually a competitive ballroom dancer. So just a bit of left field there.
I have to say, like, when I'm just doing my research, I think something came up and I was like, that's an interesting hobby. It has nothing to do with anything I could ask about on the show, but I'm glad you brought it up because it's an interesting out of left field kind of way to, kind of something interesting about yourself that isn't necessarily conservation related, which is an interesting one. But as much as I'd like to do like Strictly Come podcast, I can't. We're gonna have to. As much as I would like to ask about that, we're gonna have to bypass that one and leave the listeners mysteriously wanting more information. If you do want more information about ballroom dancing, listeners, write in and let us know.
Yeah,
we could do another podcast all about that. But yes, so all of your other work, conservation related, we could talk about. And it all sounds really, really interesting and all kind of focused around the worlds of kind of education and youth engagement. And kind of those are the main themes I think that are going to emerge a lot coming coming through the podcast, and I think have come up a lot in previous episodes. I think because we like to focus on underappreciated conservation issues here. And I think for me, getting more voices into the field of conservation, no matter their background and where they're from, whatever it is really, really important. And so I think and it's an issue that's not discussed enough, I think. So that's why I think you're the perfect guest to come on and speak about that. And so, yes, I wondered to get us started, we kind of touched on a couple of things there, but what kind of got you interested in pursuing this career in the first place? I think it's always interesting to talk to young people about this, because I feel like many young people kind of are having this experience of trying to work out what they want to do. And I want to know what it was for you that made you want to do kind of wildlife conservation-y things.
Yeah, so I always felt like, had a connection to nature. I actually
Mhm.
grew up in Dubai, and I was born there. And where we lived, we were really lucky where it was a 5 minute walk to the beach and then a 5 minute walk the other way to a park. So we were always outside, playing in the garden, swimming in the sea. Sort of, we had pets as well, so always interested in that sense. The usual sort of grew up on David Attenborough documentaries. Um, life in the undergrowth I was given that as DVDs and just inhaled
Mhm.
that. But yeah, no, there was no defining moment, but I just gradually realized I was more interested in it. I was
Mhm.
homeschooled until secondary, and then I went to secondary, and it's all these new subjects. I was like, I'm not actually interested in any of these. And apart from geography when we're doing rainforests, and biology when we're
Mhm.
doing plants and animals, and oh, actually I know a lot about it, before we've even learnt about it. And yeah, I think a real changing point was I got an aquarium when I was
Mhm.
13, 14, and I just really got into it and I was really interested in it. So I went to my local museum aquarium, and I just asked, I said, "Oh, I've just got an aquarium. I'm pretty interested in it. Can I volunteer or do some work experience?" And they were crazy enough, these full curators who, they've been the first aquarium in the world to breed certain species, and they were really high standard, and they just said, yeah, sure. And I was there 13, 14. I was like, okay. And so I just go, and it was amazing, and that really set me off on my journey to then go on. I then didn't do A levels because there weren't enough choices I was interested in. I did a BTEC in animal management, and it was the best thing I ever did. I was like, oh, this is what enjoying education and learning should be like. And then went on to
Mhm.
do my degree in zoo management.
Mhm. That's really, really interesting, actually, because it's something that I guess a lot of people, I think, assume you have to be funneled through the classic, oh, you have to do English and maths and this and that, and then kind of be funneled through the classic education system. So it's interesting to hear your story, which I didn't know is completely different to most other people's experience. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, kids, teenagers and everything are young people put under so much pressure of you've got to follow that pipeline of GCSEs, A levels, you get the degree. If it's science, you've got to do the masters. If it's going to be research based, and it's a set path of academia. And I really found, I had to really dig around and actually think, well, what am I interested in? It doesn't really fit with this course, a classic zoology a
Mhm.
degree per se, but actually this is more suited to my interests. And and I was almost a bit turn my nose up at the BTEC a bit, but then actually looking into it, it's like, well, it's still equivalent to the three A levels, and I
Mhm.
can apply for all the university courses I want to. So why not? And yeah, it was the best decision I made because everyone was stressing over A levels. And I was there like, I'm just doing an assignment on like animal husbandry. And it was brilliant. It was so much fun.
I always found that when I was doing my masters, it was like whenever we were doing animal conservation related stuff, people would be like, you'd see them like stressing, like, oh no, I have to work on the statistics base, like da da da. And like that does come into conservation, animal management, all that sort of stuff. But when I'm sat there being like, oh, I'm writing about dolphins, like, like people would just look at you like, oh, come on now.
Yeah, it was everyone in their final years doing their dissertations and things like that. And I was like, I referenced Spider-Man in mine in all this, which we'll come on to. But yeah, I managed to write a lot of assignments on tortoises in third year. I don't know how that happened. It all lined up. And so I was like, oh, I'm looking a lot at chelonians and stuff. So.
I mean, can't complain really. This is the thing. Like, and yeah, I don't know what I feel like I fell into like dolphins and whales, and they're not something that I thought I would be like particularly. Like, they weren't my thing before uni. But then I went and did conservation, and all of my essay topics ended up being about like river dolphins. And then I talked about I did an essay about the snotbot, which is which sounds gross, listeners, and I'm very sorry. It's about, and I maybe have talked about it before. It's a robot that they use to fly when whales kind of come to the top, breathe. All of the kind of stuff that shoots out into the air, this robot flies through it. It's a little drone, picks up all the snot, and it can tell then if the whale is pregnant or if it's got any kind of strange disease or whatever it is. It can pick it up, which I thought was so. Yeah, I feel like these weird things are always the most interesting ones.
I've seen that. It's so funny because I'm always just like chasing after them with boats, and I'm just trying to line it up just to get a whale sneeze. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I don't really envy the person who has to then catch the drone and deal with the kind of like, no, that's fantastic. Yes, and so I guess I wanted to ask a little bit about your zoo management and kind of animal management kind of background, because I think that's something that I didn't know a lot about. And I guess it's probably one of those courses that when you're kind of leaving high school, I think a lot of people go into very general degrees. Like they'll go into kind of a psychology or a politics or kind of something that isn't necessarily as kind of specific as zoo management. That seems very kind of on the nose. It's really kind of, so what made you kind of, what attracted you to that? And what kind of things does a degree in zoo management involve? What's that kind of like?
Well, when I'm a bit of a planner, so and
Mhm.
I'm quite lucky in the fact that I knew quite young. I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do
Mhm.
it, and and I quite like researching and finding out things and just exhausting all options. And and so I was like searching. I was looking at wildlife conservation degrees. I was looking at the zoology degrees, and I could have easily probably applied for zoology at Liverpool, which is a
Mhm.
local university that's held in high regard for animal sciences courses. But
Mhm.
actually, or Bangor even, I was considering that because they specialize in animal science, environmental sciences. But looking at the course content of what the modules were, what those entailed, what you were actually going to do, I thought actually I'm not going to get much out of this. Looking at where graduates were going, what sort of roles they were getting, and then also what the course entailed, I thought, well, a lot of these I'm interested in modules in third year, but
Mhm.
why would I sort of kind of force myself through 2 years of things that I'm not necessarily interested in, because a lot of these zoology, marine biology courses, it's a lot of lab work and microbiology in those first few years. And I wasn't that interested in that aspect. I was interested in the husbandry, the behavior, training, looking at the whole animal and in its habitat and that conservation element rather than the specific animal biology.
Mhm.
So looking at the zoo management degree, I mean, it was so much. I keep on saying it was so much fun. It didn't feel like a real degree, When I'm hearing what people were doing, I thought maybe I should have done something like that. But actually, I got a lot out of it. And the first year, I mean, it keeps on changing the course. I was asked as an alumni actually to help with feedback on how to keep on improving it, which was really nice. But it was based at a land-based college, Reseheath College, which is why I did my BTEC. So I sort of knew the progression where I was going to go there. But it was a degree from Chester, but that was just the campus for zoo management, because on site they have a mini zoo. So it's fully licensed, it's open to the public as well. And they also have a farm, because they have agricultural practices there, and it's in lovely Cheshire countryside. So it was a nice rural university, really nice to, environment to campus to be learning on. And yeah, the actual degree in the first year, you were still doing your general topics: animal disease, animal biology, behavior, and then a module in husbandry. So we went on rotation with different animals. So I was, as well as being in the outdoor zoo and indoors with different taxonomical groups, we also went on the farm, so we could have management with your bigger mammals. Because if, say, you want to be an elephant keeper, not many elephants you can volunteer with. They don't just let you. So actually, a good way to get in is having the experience with equine and sort of your cows and farm animals, which actually you're going to have the same similar husbandry procedures with that. You can then say, I've worked with as large a mammal as I possibly can without being a professional in a zoo. And then, second year we went on, we were doing, you could then specialize more, do more behavior, animal training. So I trained a lionfish I crate trained it so that a diver could go into the tank without, getting sort of prodded by one of the spikes and poisoned. And so that I was just, with a stick with a plastic ball on the end. I'm thinking, what am I doing? I've got to write an assignment about this. And and then third year, again, even more specialized. I did my biology and conservation of herpetofauna, so amphibians and reptiles, which was brilliant. There was only 8 of us in that module, so it was we're just in like a tiny pod, which was great. And then also scientific communication and zoo education. So that's where I started. I was already doing some work with the zoo, but that was a more formal taught module that then got me thinking, well, what are my next steps going to be after the degree? So, but yeah, all of the modules, animal conservation as well, obviously, zoo conservation, which was a really interesting topic. Covered it all. It was, great.
Fantastic. It sounds. I'm very jealous. I'm very, very jealous. I am very, very jealous that I did not do something like that, because it sounds fascinating and so specific in some ways into things that I have, kind of skills that I've had to learn on my own almost. And it would have been nice to have that kind of guidance, especially with things like education and kind of I think it's such an interesting kind of combination of things. Especially, I mean, I have to ask more about the lionfish. Why? What was was that for relevant to, like, what did you get offered this? Was it something you came up with? What was the story there?
Well, actually, that brings up a good point. Is it's supposed to be, all of your assignments are supposed to be anonymous, aren't they? And until they've marked them. But I was like, this completely defeats the whole purpose, because every lecturer knew which assignment was mine, because I was the only one who didn't do a mammal. Like they just knew. They were like, oh, it's the fish. Okay, it's going to be Felix's assignment, or it's the invertebrates. So I was like, well, that's not really fair. But no, it was for the training. You had to. It was almost a training scheme that you put together, a training regime, and you had to have a rationale of why you were doing it. And then you were basically giving background to what research and training techniques you were going to imply. And then you sort of kept a log and notes on how each training session went. And so it was, a full thing that you could then sort of give to the keeper and be like, here, I've done that. And so because we have the zoo on site, we were quite lucky. We've got this 10,000 litres, I want to say, aquarium, something like that, and pretty big. And it has a lionfish. And so for those who might not be aware, they have very venomous spines. And apparently it's been described to me as getting hit with a baseball bat with nails in it in, your sensitive areas. And you've got to go straight to hospital for that. So if they want to clean the tank, I mean, there are lots of different methods in aquariums, with large-scale aquariums, on how to clean them. But there was a lot of hardscape features, so that's your rocks and the background, so it's not just see-through and you can see all the filtration at the back. And so there was build-up of algae. They would like to get someone properly in, which would mean just even like not properly a diver, but someone just to get in. But they've got the lionfish, and you could catch it, but when you're using those finer nets, the spines get tangled easily, and that can cause stress to the fish, and could cause potential accidents if it's then trying to escape, and you might have to cut the nets, which are then again is sort of ruining equipment. So a better option was to try and crate train it. So if you can go over here, Simba. He was called Simba, the lionfish, of course. If you can train them to go into a crate, of their own accord, and you can just put the top on and they're used to it, it means that they're sort of in one corner and then someone can safely enter and leave the tank. So that entailed me going, and the tank, there was almost a gap before the top of the tank. So it involved me just on my stomach, lying down with a sharpened bamboo stick, with bits of muscle on the end of it. Just sort of conditioning Simba to be like, this is good, you want this because it's a high quality, high reward food. And then having, as I was saying, a stick with like a ball pit ball that's glued on the end of it, next to it to associate, so say, look, the ball means food, it's good. And so then I was trying to get it to go to different parts of the tank. You can train anything, but with things like fish, which some might, depending on the species, have sort of lower cognitive ability, let's say that. I'm not, poor fish, they get a bad rap. And so you've just got to repeat things quite a lot. So after that, it was, smaller steps than you might do with a mammal, where depending on how things are going, you can maybe skip a step or say, oh, actually, they're pretty confident with this. And so from there, I was just then putting the crate in the water. So it was, getting accustomed to it even when I wasn't there for training sessions. And then slowly and surely I was getting it closer and closer until it was in there. And then you slowly, put the top on it, but only for, briefly, and then you extend the time as you go on. So it's just this gradual progression that you just plan out, and and then hopefully, fingers crossed, it works. And it did in the end, so that's good.
That's fantastic and really interesting. And I think people probably don't give fish enough credit, because I know for a fact there are people I've told repeatedly certain things and they don't pick it up. So if a fish eventually can pick things up, I would say they're doing just as well as some people. So
yeah, for sure.
Can't blame it.
No.
That's fantastic. And really, really interesting. And yes, I think kind of loops on into another issue, because or another issue. It's not that made it sound so serious. Another topic that I wanted to discuss, which was to do with education. So you mentioned there you kind of had a little bit there. You had the courses there in zoo education and kind of that element of conservation. And I guess was that the first spark then for you wanting to go on and kind of become an educator, or was it something that maybe kind of, what was the impact of that, and how did you end up down the education road?
I mean, looking back, I actually have always enjoyed teaching people about things, especially cool animal facts, as I think we all did when we were younger. And, there was like one instance where, this is so Dubai, where just because you've got like these quite extravagant houses and rich sheikhs and everything, they always have like peacocks in their gardens and stuff, and then on golf courses and all sorts. Like that was just my normal. It's so weird. And anyway, and so I think one had escaped or something, and we had a peacock in our garden, and I was like, oh my god. Like, just because they were like my favorite bird at the time because of like the plumes and everything. I was like, ah! Like we went to Al Ain Zoo, which had like a white peacock, and I was like losing my mind. Like, it was amazing. And anyway, and my dad was like, oh well, we've got to try catch it and give it to the vet. And I was like, if you try corner it, it's going to fly. And he was saying, peacocks don't fly. And I was like, yes, they do. I was having a full argument with him. Anyway, they tried to corner it, and then it flew on the roof. So I was, and so that's like a resounding moment when I was like 5 or something, you know, just telling my dad, I told you so. And, but anyway, so from that, you know, fast forward, when I was doing my BTEC, there was an opportunity to be for leadership, an education leadership role, because since the zoo on site is a licensed zoo, it has to be open to the public, and they've got to, you know, provide educational opportunities. And so they had an outreach team that would book schools in to have visits, link it to the curriculum. They'd have a nice day out, and then they would hopefully go away learning something that, you know, is a nice curriculum link. So I started on that, and so I shadowed some of the guides, and then soon enough I was leading these primary school groups, which was brilliant because it was a flexible role. I wasn't tied to a contract, but I still got some pocket money, which was always a bonus. And so I was doing that all through college and university, but then in my final year, as stated, I was doing that module in scientific communication and zoo education. So I took on a few more roles at the zoo. So I was working closely with the education officer, doing like helping out in holidays with zoo school and zoo academy, with homeschooled groups that were coming in to do sessions. And then also in my final year, since we weren't at university all week, it wasn't as full time since, you know, we were getting to the end of it. I also volunteered for a term at a local primary school on one of my days off, just so I was getting that formal education experience as well as informal. So it was sort of an amalgamation of all of these things put together. I wasn't sold on a master's in third year. I thought, I don't really want to do more of this, actually. That sounds really bad, but no, as in there wasn't enough. There were options that I thought, again, looking at what those graduates went on to do, related to what I was interested in. So after looking at zoo conservation, education jobs, they all are saying, oh, it's quite desirable to have a PGCE, which is a postgraduate certificate in education, which is what you need to do if you want to become a qualified teacher. And so me, with my bright ideas, was like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. I'm going to go and I'll become a teacher. And then I can either do that and go down that road of just being a formal teacher, and just that mad science teacher you see usually, or I'll take that and then I can go and do more environmental conservation-based education.
Interesting. And so, yes, how did you then end up? I suppose you said at the start you ended up being a teacher for a while. So how did you end up kind of skewing too much to the side that was maybe the backup plan? How did that happen?
I kind of fell into it, really. Because the PGCE that I took was a school direct one, where it was, instead of being lecture, based at a university, it was almost you were learning on the job. So 4 days a week I was in a primary school, and then 1 day a week I was having lectures, but it was by staff in the cluster of schools that were part of that program,
Hmm.
which is better for me because I'm quite a practical, hands-on learner. I thought there's no point learning about behavior management in a lecture when you just have to do it and say, from your experiences. But yeah, and I did enjoy it, and I think it's because in my last placement I had probably the best class I've ever had, and they were just amazing. And I then thought, well, I'll do supply teaching because that's a bit more flexible. I've been in
Hmm.
full-time education for 4 years now, and see how that goes. And then the first school I went to, they offered me a full-time contract. So I was like, right, I guess we're doing that. And not going to lie, money is also a bit of, a pull. And it was just convenient since I'd been offered that full-time position. It was a really nice
Hmm.
school. I got on with all the staff. The kids were great. I thought, well, I'll do my. You've got, as a new teacher, you've got an ECT, an early career teacher period of 2 years before you're
Hmm.
sort of fully qualified. And so I thought, I'll do my ECT, and then the world's my oyster, can do whatever. Um, and anyway, cut to about 3 weeks ago. It was in March, sort of mid-March, beginning of
Hmm.
March. The head said, I'll observe one of your lessons. And so I said, okay, great. And she observed one of my lessons. And then we had a meeting afterwards. And she has a coaching background as well. And so does a lot of value work. And she
Hmm.
kind of, a short story was, she said, you don't really believe in this, do you? Or you don't really want to do this? And I was, and I was kind of taken a bit off guard, but because I sort of, we had quite a good relationship, I was just there like, no. And she just said, she had only seen me outside of the classroom interacting with the kids, and also on the playing field. I'd done loads for that outdoor area. I'd put wood chip for paths. I'd sawed down their willow so that it would coppice, so I could weave it. And like I was doing all of these things, like their eco committee as well.
Hmm.
And I think she could see that I was more interested in that than
Hmm.
sitting in the classroom and marking books, and forcing children to work in books. And I said, yeah, you're right there. So she said, just go have a think about it. And then that night I applied I put a deposit down for the forest school leader course. And I came back and she said, I've done that. And she said, okay, do that then. So it was so it was all, positives where everyone was on the same page. Nothing negative happened.
Hmm.
And since then, yeah, things fell into place. I then applied for the Wildlife Trust position and got shortlisted, and then got the job for that as well.
Hmm.
So it seemed like the right decision. Like everything seems to have happened for a reason, which is good.
Yes, yes. I think that's the perfect and yeah, I feel like if it's one of those things, especially it must have been hard being someone who didn't kind of grow up in primary schools and doing primary school education in the UK, then becoming a teacher in a primary school. My mind is like, why? What? I feel like she'd probably have been like already like, this seems strange. He doesn't know what he's let himself in for here. Like, but
Yeah,
no, that
yeah, for
pardon.
sure. No, I was just going to say, in a way, it was a unique opportunity because I was
Hmm.
going in with an open mind, and I thought,
Hmm.
oh, they'll all be kind of similar, right? And then it was like wrong. And so my first placement on my PGC was completely different to my second placement.
Hmm.
And again, completely different to when I was on supply. So it was interesting to know how the system worked, and I was like, okay, not for
Hmm.
me, don't agree with it. I'm going to do something else.
Yes, and that brings you to now, which is your kind of forest school course and kind of the wildlife trust and all that sort of stuff. And so transitioning into that kind of outdoor education must feel like the correct thing to have done and kind of seem like you're back where you belong almost. Is that kind of that's kind of correct, isn't it? Yeah. It's like
Yeah, I mean, yesterday I was I've got a site for my forest school but it's very much overgrown and has been left to its own devices. So it was almost, imagine, those scenes in, where they're going through the rainforest with like machetes and stuff. That was me with loppers, like wrestling conifers and things like that. Just prepare, all sustainably managed. I will say that I'm not just chopping down trees, or it's, introduced, or, really, hardy species that I know will come back. And I was just in my, just sweating, like getting cobwebs and everything on me. But, it was brilliant. It was a sort of like, yes, this is what I want to do. And also the holistic development learning side, I think, is way more beneficial for children growing up. I won't go into that because that's a whole nother podcast of me against the Department of Education. So
that could be part 2. Once we've covered all the good fun stuff, we can come back for a ranty episode about whatever that.
Well, I destroy my reputation. But so it was just from doing the training. It helps with motor skills and balance and cognition, and it's that it's child-led, and it's not, as people think, where they're like, oh, you're just going to go to the fire and sing Kumbaya, with the guitar or something, Wonderwall, and so there is so much research behind it, where I just think it's so beneficial for children, especially in this day and age, as we know, with you can't get away from technology. When I talk to kids, oh, what did you do during half term? Oh, I was just on Xbox. They don't leave the house unless they've got parents who are actively getting them involved. And it's great to see these campaigns from different wildlife nature organizations trying to get more children out. But it's just the case in point that I think it's a third of UK children, I might need to check this fact, but it's something like a third of UK children spend less time outdoors than high security prisoners, something like that.
That's frightening. That's really scary. Yeah.
And so things like that, where and from first-hand anecdote experiences, I worked with a boy with ADHD, and he was sort of labeled the naughty child, in the class. But I could see he was so capable and so clever. And it was just, he wasn't engaged with what was going on because he's, they're not allowed to, we call them schemers, where, fiddling with a pen is actually helping them process and take in the information, but they're not allowed to do that. And they're not allowed to get up and walk around because it's more crowd control than teaching. And so he was always getting in trouble. But when I took him out and he said, we found a log, and he said, oh, I want to make a bug hotel. I was like, brilliant, let's make a bug hotel. So I brought in my my drill, and I said, here you go, 8-year-old child. Which sounds bad, but he was so focused and had the right stance. It didn't wobble at all. He was just just did it by himself, and it was just amazing to see. And it just shows, if you act more as a facilitator and guide them, what they can achieve. It always surprises you. And that's why I just thought, this is what is more what I think is more beneficial. So I want to be able to provide that service for kids who maybe don't have that luxury.
I think so. And I think it's good for I feel like, growing up and going to scouts and all these sorts of things, I feel like the times when you're outdoors and doing things, and yes, being handed a saw, age, whatever it is, as I was, as well, like, I feel like you're getting, like, it gives you responsibility and it teaches you all of these things that go alongside, beyond nature, kind of, and loving of nature. It teaches you a lot of social skills, a lot of kind of like practical skills, just kind of, I think it builds a more rounded person generally, no matter who you are, where you kind of, what your opportunities have been. If you get outside and do these things, it can help really make a big difference on your life, in a big way. So yes, couldn't agree more. I think something that might be good to highlight for listeners is, we've been talking about forest schools, but if somebody doesn't know what a forest school necessarily is, How would you describe it to somebody? Like, how would you pitch a forest school to someone who didn't really know about them?
Okay, yes, I've done all of this in my training, so I should be good at this. Um, so if you think as an umbrella term, we've got outdoor
Mhm.
education, which very self-explanatory. You do anything outside, that's outdoor education. Even if it's
Yeah.
on the playground, PE, that's outdoors. You then have environmental education, which is
Mhm.
specifically based around your natural history, sciences, geography. And so the work I do with Wildlife Trust is environmental education. And that is still led by someone, it's still planned. You've got sort of a session outline for that.
Mhm.
Forest School is based around 6 forest school principles. So that still, falls under the outdoor learning umbrella, but
Mhm.
it has to be led by a professional, so someone who has a level 3 in forest schools. Forest school training, it is holistic, so it gives,
Mhm.
for that, it's, as you said, looking at the whole child, so their emotional, physical, social development. It's risk taking as well.
Mhm.
Not like life or death, suitable risk, but risk doesn't have to be physical necessarily with,
Mhm.
whittling with a knife. It could also be a social risk, trying to, ask to be included in a game or to, there's lots of different ways, risk as can be defined and used. It's also long term, so
Mhm.
to have that benefit, it has to be over a long period of time. It has to be in a natural setting. Obviously, forest school, but there's also beach school training as well. So for
Mhm.
coastal areas, they'll obviously be utilizing those coastline areas. And then the main one, I think that differentiates it is it's child led and child
Mhm.
initiated majority of the time. So you can have a rough plan of what you're going to do in a session, but if the kids go, I want to play another game after you've done one game, you're not going to
Mhm.
go, no, I've got this really nice lesson plan that I spent hours on. You're going to go, okay, let's play another game. Or,
Mhm.
I can see that they're really enjoying working with clay and making things out of clay. Let's just do more of that. It's not
Mhm.
defined. That you've got to tick off these objectives that they've got to achieve, because that, each child is different and is going to need different things. Your
Mhm.
job is, as a pedagogue almost, is to observe these, reflect on them, and then
Mhm.
for the next session come back and give them what they require for their personal development. So there might be a kid that's just digging a hole with a stick and is just really interested in digging this hole. The next session, you might say, oh, here's how we can whittle that stick so it's sharper, so you can dig a bigger hole. And then it might be, what kind of stick, what species, what tree, wood
Mhm.
would be best for digging this hole. Maybe we can look at tool use. How can we use a mallet so that we
Mhm.
can get the stick really deep into the soil? And through that, you've actually taught them, tree identification. You've taught them safe tool use, which is fine and gross motor skills, as well as for them to, but it's all led by them, and it's up to
Mhm.
them on what they choose to go. So you're just providing the resources and a bit of guidance to make sure that they are safe as well when they're doing that.
That's fantastic. I think it's a great thing because I'm always behind anything that kind of teaches kids the skills alongside the kind of practical skills, the skills to identify things that are around them in nature as well. Because I think a lot of documentaries that kids stick on will be about like elephants or tigers or things that are far away. So having these identification skills for like local areas where they're growing up in is also so important. And I think I didn't realize how few people seem to get that. So it's I think a forest school should be really important because it's one of those things. I think it was during one of my lectures I was sitting and the lecturer was flashing up images of local seabirds because I was in St Andrews and it was kind of one of these things where everyone sat around me. Granted, some of them weren't from kind of around St Andrews, but there was a couple from the UK and they were kind of listening and kind of going, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. And I was sat there, and it was like, you know, that way where the lecturer you could see was getting wound up by the fact I was like, oyster catcher, this type of gull, that type of gull, this, that, and the next thing. And having those skills, like, I think is so important. And it was only in that circumstance I realized not a lot of people have them. So to have a program that kind of equips all of these different intelligences and identification things, it's fantastic and really interesting. And I think, yeah, I feel like if I end up with kids one day, they'll definitely be forced to do that one way or another. Whether they want to, whether it's pouring with rain or snowing or hail, they'll be out doing that sort of thing. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even on the course,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able, because they say, that outdoors is your office now.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to know what all the resources are and where
Mm-hmm.
everything goes. And so we went around, and the instructor's going, "What's this tree?" I was like, "Beech." He's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "What's this one?" I was like, "Hawthorn." And he was starting, as he said, to get a bit annoyed at me. He was like, "Not you, someone else. What's this one?" But that's just, it's, as we said, we're the gap. We're just losing touch with nature.
Mm-hmm.
Small things like acorn and words like this are being taken out of child dictionaries, and more technological terms are being put, and so
Mm-hmm.
kids are saying, that thing or this, and they don't actually know. And that's one thing, that to get that connection,
Mm-hmm.
every time if I did a tour, it's what's the name of that animal, or what's its name, just to that's the
Mm-hmm.
first step to then remembering it and sort of banking it in your mind. And yeah, and it happened all the time with that identifying. The kids just don't know, and I'm going, "Oh, it's a hawthorn. We can, or it's a hazel. We can make bow and arrows out of that." And just knowing that there's a use for it, and
Mm-hmm.
as I said, being part of that full project, and what can that be used for, and seeing it the whole way through, it gives that those children that opportunity to, yeah, just reconnect, really.
It's fantastic. It's and yeah, I don't know. I feel like if there's anyone listening who wants to get involved in something like that, Google kind of your local forest school, and if you've got kids, send them to whatever it is, because I'm sure they'll be all. It won't just be a type of thing that's around where Felix is. There will be them presumably all over, definitely the UK, if not further afield. I guess.
Yes, it
Mhm,
used to be separated between sort of England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, where they were saying we're all doing our own different things. But then we've all banded together again under the Forest School Association,
mhm,
and under those 6 principles. And so, yeah, they are across the whole country. You can go on the Forest School Association and look for an accredited provider, but it doesn't necessarily have to be accredited. They can
mhm.
just be as good. It's just almost a little sticker badge saying you're doing, you're following the 6 principles.
hmm And even I feel like, yeah, I'd even say do things like force your kids to do things like Scouts or Duke of Edinburgh Awards or something like that. The bear, like get them to do all these outdoor things because I feel like they are fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. If you're able to, I mean, that
Hmm
goes into another thing of
hmm
socioeconomic factors, green spaces. I was interested in doing Duke of Edinburgh. I was like, oh, Duke of Edinburgh, oh, £190. I'm not doing that. Can't do that. And so I didn't get that opportunity, even though I knew I probably would have loved it, and
hmm
I just had to be resourceful. And I would just find, as I said, with the volunteering with the aquarium and things, I
hmm
just found other ways to get involved. But it was all led by me. I mean, my mum has been really supportive, and with
hmm
all my interests, and she's put up with a lot. And although she was saying you can only have one thing, so I was like, I'm going to get an aquarium because I can get multiple species in that. Whereas if I had frogs or something, I could only have one or two. But I was like, oh, I'll have the aquarium, and then I can get loads of things there, and it's the plants and animals. It's a whole ecosystem. And but yeah, so she was very supportive. But it majority has come from just my personal drive to
hmm
find a way and find these things. And making it as easy as possible for people, and young people especially, who want to get involved is definitely something I want to make more accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you kind of, and it's not that I forget about it. It's just one of those things that I feel like at my school, Duke of Edinburgh was paid, but it was very low because being in Scotland, you can go outside, walk about 3 feet, and you're up a mountain. So it was like they didn't have to charge a lot for it. But I suppose, yeah, we're in places where it's a bit more flat or where there's less kind of
A bit, yeah. Yeah,
um,
yeah, it was. Yeah, I distinctly remember, and it was just when we were going through, a bit of a rough patch as a family, that it just
mhm,
wasn't, feasible.
mhm.
And yeah, but you find other ways. I did
Mhm.
beekeeping on the school roof. I did lots of different things. I had-
What? I feel like that's a health and safety nightmare. What? Okay.
Oh, it was brilliant. We got like over 100 jars of honey in our first harvest, but we made them from scratch and everything. And it's because the greenhouse was on the roof. Weird layout for school, I
Yeah,
will
yeah.
say. But there's railings and everything, but we're like in the full bee suit get up. And and I learned so much about bees. And yeah, we harvested the honey and everything. I mean, we had once where they swarmed in the playground squad, and so we had to go down with like the beekeeper and like evacuate the school playground and like rescue these bees back into a box. And all my classmates were just like, "What are you doing?" Because I was just walking through the corridors like in a bee suit. I was like, "Hi guys." So yeah. It's almost like I didn't go to school. I only remember these sort of things. But they've been the most helpful.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is not if probably the least classic example of education I think I've ever heard in my life. But it just goes to show that you can do really anything and end up where you want to be. So,
Yeah,
an
I think
inspiring message.
yeah, I think with that homeschool background, I just wasn't as indoctrinated sometimes with what you
Hmm.
were supposed to do in formal education. I was like, I'm not. No, I don't want to do that, so I'm not going to. And I mean, I was usually a bit more sneaky about it but because of homeschool, we did so much
Hmm.
extracurricular activities, and we were the proper sort of Renaissance children, and and so I gave value to those skills and
Hmm.
experiences, because I learnt more from them from
Hmm.
than being in the classroom. So I played the game. I got the GCSEs. I got what I had to do, and then but then I just tried to make it as interesting as possible. So I was, in the orchestra, I was doing beekeeping, I was, doing all these other things that I thought,
Hmm.
this is a unique place where all of these things are all together.
Hmm.
So I'll just, take advantage while I can. And I mean, we're going to have beehives on my forest school site. So, full circle, it's all relevant.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think that I feel like this shouldn't have been what I was thinking the whole time you were talking, but I assume you are familiar with the very popular film Mean Girls. All I can think about is you're the Katie Heron who's like come from Dubai in this case instead of Africa and is doing all of these these practices that are non-classic kind of things and just come
What
to
way?
this like this relatively normal school like why is he like that? Why is but he's just like amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know what you mean, actually. It is very like that.
Hmm.
But people are just like, oh, that's just Felix.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think we'll kind of loop back to this. We've talked about this for a long time now. So I think
Yes.
what we'll do is we will loop back to this at the end when I like to ask for advice and things for people. So if anyone is looking for advice on things, we'll come back to that at the end. But I think what we'll transition into now is a little chat about the Chester Zoo Youth Board because I wanted to make the time to ask you about that as well. Hello, everyone. Sorry to interrupt, but me and Felix had such a great time talking that the conversation went on for another hour. So, I have made the executive decision to split this in two. We'll keep this first section all about forest schools, and next week Felix will be back to chat all about the incredible Chester Zoo Youth Board and some of the weird creatures that are hidden away in Chester Zoo. Really come back and listen to it because there are some strange things there. But yes, that means for now that we have to wrap up, unfortunately. So sorry. So sorry. Until next time, of course, you can find all of the links we discussed today in the description for this week's episode. You can also find links to find us on social media down there as well. We are at Pangolin Podcast on everything, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or wherever you're going, at Pangolin Podcast. We're on there. You can also make sure to follow us on your podcast streaming service of choice, whether that be Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever it is, we are on there. So please make sure and give us a follow so you don't miss out when Felix comes back next week. Now, yes, that brings us to the end of the show. So all I've got to say is a massive thank you to Felix for his time, and a massive thank you to all of you for listening as well. And until next time, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you. And I think I said thank you enough, didn't I? Thank you. And goodbye.